It looks like the tariffs are finalized by the Trump administration and have announced that 25% tariffs would be applied to imported passenger vehicles and light trucks that are imported into the United States. And this means it's not just Mexico and Canada, but everybody. In this video, we will dig deeper into this and look at what does this all mean, especially if you're waiting for a car, buying a new car in the upcoming months or even years. Let's get to it. Hey, it's LSFT here today, and today we're here to look at the White House press release. You can see here they have fact sheets talking about the imports into the United States. So you can see here what they say is the 25% tariff will be applied to imported passenger vehicles, sedans, SUVs, crossover minivans, cargo vans, and light trucks, as well as automotive parts, including engines, transmissions, powertrain parts, and electric components, and process to expand tariffs on additional parts if necessary. They did add a phrase talking about the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, and it says that importers of automobiles under the US-Mexico-Canada agreement will be given the opportunity to certify their US content and systems that will implement such that 25% tariffs will only apply to the value of their non-US content. So the USMCA compliant automotive parts will remain tariff-free until the Secretary of Commerce, in the consultation of the U.S. Customs Border Protection, establish a process to apply tariffs to their non-U.S. content. All right, so then I think the biggest thing is, now what is the equation? How much is the percentage of a vehicle that is made in U.S. versus Canada, Mexico, Japan, and all the other countries? Unfortunately, this information is not readily available because I think even the car manufacturers don't have this information and they have to collect that information. What information that we have is really related to a percentage that are US and Canada made. We have that information because the NHTSA does have that information, and we did pull that information from 2025 that's published in the NHTSA site. And before we actually go and look at the percentage of content of US-Canada, let's look at what vehicles are assembled in the United States. So you can see here we have GM with Cadillac, Chevrolet, GMC, Buick, and you can see the models that are assembled in the United States. And I can tell you there's not a single model in this list is 100% built in the United States, which means all these vehicles will be impacted with tariffs. Vehicles that are not on this list will be 100% impacted with the 25% tariff because none of it is made in the United States. So you can see here, we have a bunch of Fords, we have a bunch of Lincolns, Dodge, Jeep, Rams, Genesis has a Kia, Genesis has one electric vehicle, Hyundai has 3, Kia has 4 vehicles, Honda has an Acura, 4 models, the Accord Civic, a bunch of vehicles are assembled in the United States. Nissan has a bunch, Toyota Lexus has a bunch, and you have the others, the BMWs, the Lucids, Subarus, Mazda, Tesla, Geely has the Volvo and the Polestar. So a bunch of vehicles are assembled in the United States. All right, so I'm not going to go through every single item on this list because there is 486 models. So this is definitely not something that we will want to go through in a whole video. But I'm going to do some highlights, and especially we'll focus on Toyota Lexus because, again, you subscribed or you're viewing this because you're a Lexus or Toyota fan or you're an owner of these vehicles. But let's first look at Ford and just get a sense of what we're talking about. So the big three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis. They are domestic vehicle manufacturers, and you would expect them having higher domestic. Follow me on Instagram at LSFT Videos. You can see updates on my experience with the NX450H Plus, which may not be shown on any future videos. You can reach out to me via direct messaging if you have any questions on your Lexus. If you like this video, you can provide me feedback in the comments below like this video, share it with your friends. This definitely will help with the YouTube algorithms. Press the subscribe button and bell icon and get notified when new videos show up. And lastly, if you want to support me further, you can provide me a super thanks, or visit my Amazon storefront before you purchase anything from Amazon, and or you can purchase products from the list on the items that I've been using with my vehicle or at home at no extra cost to you. And now let's continue with the video. The Bronco for Ford, okay? You can see here 42% are made in US/Canada. So it could be lower because we don't know the split between that. We know that 16% is made in Mexico. So when you add those two up, it doesn't equal 100%. That's interesting, right? But we will know that it's final assembled in the United States, and the engine, so the 2.3 liter is made in Mexico, the 2.7 and the 3 liter is made in the United States. The transmission is made in the United States, but there's also transmissions made in China. When you look at the Bronco Sport, only 23% has US-Canada content. So hopefully it's 100% US. If not, it'll be a little bit different. But 64% is in Mexico. So the Bronco Sport will cost more because all the parts are coming from Mexico and 25% tariffs are going to go on there. And you can see that the final assembly is in Mexico, but if it had a 2-liter engine, then that's coming from the US. But if it's a 1.5 liter, then it's coming from Mexico. The transmission is coming from US as well. So definitely not bad, I would say, but again, you can see that this is definitely going to hurt Ford, and the cost of the Bronco would go up, skyrocket up. And then we look at the F-150. That's a very common vehicle for Ford. You can see here, 45% is made in US/Canada. They did not disclose what other countries it's coming from, but when you look at it, 2.7 and 5 liters are coming from the United States. The 3.5 liter is coming from Mexico. All right, and then transmissions are coming from the United States. So 45%. So if you look at it, 55% plus more, maybe some are made in Canada, but 55% are going to be tariffed at 25%. And the rest, hopefully, are all in the United States, and those are tariff-free. So the next one I'm going to look at is Tesla, because we all know that Tesla has a high percentage of US made, but then definitely they're not 100%, right? So let's look at Tesla here. So we have the Teslas here, and you can see the Cybertruck is 65% made in United States/Canada. And I think they're mostly 100% United States here. 25% is Mexico. And the rest, you can see that the engines and all that are all made in United States. So there are some parts for the Cybertruck that are made in Mexico. Even all the vehicles, if you look at it, you can see the highest you can see is the Model 3, the long range is almost at 75%, and there's 20% that is in Mexico, and you add that up, that's only 95%. So there's still 5% of unknown, don't know where it's coming from. About 25% are going to be tariffed. So the price hike for the Teslas will most likely be not as high as other manufacturers, but definitely when you look at these formulas, there still be impact to that. All right, so now we're going to look at Lexus, and now I actually removed my filter so it shows even the 0% ones so that you get a sense of all the vehicles that are sold in the United States. So first off is the Lexus ES 250/350, which is the gas model, and you can see that 50% is Canada-US content. We have 35% that is made in Japan, so that adds up to 85%, so there's still like 15% of unknown. It's assembled in the United States. Its engine it can be sourced from US and Japan, and the transmission is also US and Japan. So there's a portion that is coming from Japan, some are coming from the United States. So there's a mix here. And then we look at the ES300H, the hybrid. 45% is US-Canada content, 40% is Japan, so 85%, and then assembled US, engines coming from US, and the transmissions coming from Japan. So what you can see here is the transmission will have a 25% tariff, and then the engine will be fine. Here we have the IS. So the IS is purely 100% made in Japan. So you will not see anything, and there's no parts that are outside. The GX, same thing. We have all Japan, the LC500, ILC 500 convertible, and the 500H, the all LCs are 100% Japan. The LS, the 500 and the hybrid, all made in Japan. We have the LX 600 and the 700H, all made in Japan. All right, then the NX. So we do know that the NX does have an assembly plant in Canada. So we have the NX 250, 350, so 50% is US and Canada content. So I would say that there's probably more Canadian content than US content here. But again, keep in mind, you can see here, there's US made engines. So 30% is coming from Japan. So adds up to 80%. And you can see here, it's either made in Japan or Canada, final assembly. We have engines that can come from Japan or US, and the transmission is coming from Japan. So if you think of it, if you have a Canadian assembled NX350, not 100% of the vehicle is actually made in Canada and US. There's the transmission that's purely made in Japan based on this sheet. All right, so then we have the NX350H, the hybrid. So 45% is US Canada content and 45% is Japan content. So that goes to 90%. You have Japan made or Canadian assembled, and then you can see that the engine, I'm assuming that if it's assembled in Japan, you'll get it a Japan engine. If it's assembled in Canada, the engine's coming from the United States, vice versa with the transmission. All right. So overall, if you have a Canadian assembled NX350H, you probably will be cheaper from a tariff standpoint in comparison to a Japan-made one, because the engine and the transmissions made in US. So that would actually be tariff-free, and the other parts include tariffs. So I don't know how Toyota and Lexus are gonna do these calculations, but this is definitely very complex. All right, then the NX450H Plus. Interestingly, 90% is made in Japan. So there's still 10%. And my assumption that 10% is China. But I don't know because it doesn't state it here. But you can see that final assembles in Japan, the engine and the transmission is all made in Japan. We have the RC300 and 350, 100% Japan. We have the RCF is 100% Japan. And then now we come to the RX350. And then if you look at the numbers, it's still different from the NX. So they're made in the same assembly in Canada. So 55% is US Canada content and 25% is made in Japan. Final assembly is Canada and Japan, and we have engines that are US and Japan. Transmissions are also US Japan. The RX350H and the 500H, so the two hybrids, 40% of US Canada content, 35% of Japan content. So assembled in Canada, US engine, and Japan transmission. We look at the RX450H Plus, plug-in hybrid, 85% that is Japan, 15% that is China. So I don't know if it's the battery or what component, but it seems like plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles, there is some components coming from China. Japan, Japan, Japan on the engines and assembly. We have the RZ, the battery electric RZ, and you can see that's 90% Japan, 10% China. So there's probably some components that are coming from China. Japan, Japan, Japan. All right. So the TX, which is assembled in the United States, 65% for the 350 is purely made in US, Canada. There's 20% that's coming from Japan, so that adds up to 85. Assembled in US, engine could be US or Japan, and the transmission is coming from the US. We have the TX 500H, and that's 45% US Canada content, 40% Japan, so 85. US assembled, US and Japan engines and Japan transmissions. We have the TX plug-in hybrid. 25% is only US Canada content. There's 65% coming from Japan. So that's 90% in total. And then we have US assembled Japan engine and Japan transmission. So that V6 is coming from Japan. We have the UX300H, 100% made in Japan. All right, so we've gone through all the Lexus vehicles here. So now let's go into the Toyotas. So let's just go through all the ones that are 100% Japan so that we don't have to worry about it. So the 4Runner is 100% Japan. We have the Corolla hatchback, Corolla hybrid, the Crown are all 100% made in Japan. We have the GR Corolla. We have the Land Cruiser, Mirai, and Prius. That is 100% Japan. Okay, so then now let's go and look at the rest. So we have the 4Runner hybrid, which is 5% using Canadian US content. Interesting, right? But then it's assembled in Japan. So we have parts coming from North America, 5% of it, that's shipped to Japan for assembly. And then we have the BZ4X, which is very similar to when you look at the RZ, but that's 80% Japan and 20% in China. So there's more parts that are coming from China, but again, all made in Japan afterwards. We look at the Camry hybrid. So the new Camry, 55% are made in US and Canada. And when you look at it, the engine transmission is made in the United States. So 30% is Japan, and the rest we don't know because that's only 85%. But again, the Camry hybrid will probably be less impacted because at least half of the vehicle is made in United States. We look at the Corolla, same thing, 55% is US Canada content, 25% is Japan, and then you look at it, the engine's made in USA and Japan, and the transmission is coming from Japan. We have the Corolla Cross, 60% is made in US Canada, 25% Japan, and then US engine, but transmission is Japan. Corolla Cross Hybrid is 50%, 40% made in Japan, that's 90%. US assembled, US engine, Japan transmission. All right, then we look at the GR86. So 85% is Japan. So I don't know where the rest, where that 15% is going from to, but it's not 100% made in Japan. We have the Grand Highlander and the Grand Highlander Hybrid. 65% is made in United States or in Canada, and 25% is in Japan. So that adds up to 90%. US assembled, US engine, or Japan engine, and then transmission is also Japan or United States. With the hybrid, it's 55%, 35% in Japan, US assembled. We also have engines coming from Japan and US, and transmission is purely Japan. Right, so we look at the Highlander and Highlander hybrid. 65% US Canada content, hybrid is 55, 20 for Japan, and 30 for Japan. The assembly is in United States, and you can see the engine is sourced from Japan and United States, and also the transmission seems to be more coming from Japan, and United States makes some of them. So then we look at here, you notice here I have a RAV4 that is in 20 with an asterisk because in the 2025 sheet, they did not have any RAV4s. So I went back to the 2024 to pull the 2024 sheet, and you can see that 70% is US Canada content. And you can also see here is 15% is coming from Japan. So add that up, that's about 85%. So I don't know where the other 15 is coming from. But then the final assembly is Canada or Japan, engines coming from US, and then Japan probably is to assist, and also US Japan for the transmission. So it's actually good news to see 70% for the RAV4, which means their best-selling vehicle, at least I would say a high percentage is made in US/Canada. Then we look at the Sequoia hybrid. It's 50% US Canada content, 25% Japan. There's 15% coming from Mexico. So US engine, and Japan transmission. Then we look at the Sienna. Sienna is 60% US Canada content, 30% Japan, and US, and then the transmission is Japan. We have the Tacoma, and you can see that one is really 35% US Canada content, 20% Japan, and 30% Mexico. You can see that it's assembled in Mexico. The engine is coming from US and the transmission is US, Japan, or even Thailand. And then we look at the Tacoma Hybrid, 30% US Canada content, 35% Japan, 25% Mexico, assembled in Mexico, US engine, Japan transmission. We look at the Tundra. Tundra is 55% US Canada, 15% coming from Japan, 15% coming from Mexico, engines coming from US, and the transmission is from Japan. The Tundra Hybrid, 50% content, 25% Japan, 15% Mexico, US assembled, US engine, and Japan transmission. So from what I'm seeing here overall, if they really want to reduce the tariffs, Japan first thing should actually have a transmission plant in the United States. That means all these could actually be changed to the United States, which actually gives a greater percentage of content of US. I think that will actually help reduce the cost of the vehicles, but really when you look at it, it's very hard. Like there really is no car. Like if I scroll up here, the more red, the more content, and you can see 70% of the MDX. What else is here? 70% of the Odyssey, they're all at 75% of the Ridgeline. There's not that many cars that are that high. With the Kia EV6, 80%. That's probably one of the highest ones. So 80% is the highest, and that's the EV from Kia. So really, when you look at it, no matter what, any car sold in the United States will have a certain percentage that will be 25% tariffed. So really, when you look at it, you have an X1 that's coming from Germany, 0%. So it'll be 25% more expensive. And I really don't believe that the OEMs are going to absorb 25% of the cost because I think the margins aren't that high. So what are they going to do? It's just going to get passed down to the buyers because dealerships aren't earning 25% profit. So what can they do? This is going to be tough times. And really, used cars are going to go up in price. And I think my 3-year-old NX 450 Plus will go up in price as well because it will get 25% more expensive in the US market. Fortunately, in Canada, I don't think we're going to see that big of a difference because there is no tariffs between Japan and Canada. But unfortunately, with these tariffs coming on April 2nd, we will see a drastic increase in pricing. And for the folks who are waiting for a vehicle and it's coming in the next few weeks, I hope that they'll honor you the same price, but definitely any new vehicles that they're going to sell, there may be a new price to it. Or they may have a clause that it'll fluctuate depending on how the White House will fluctuate as well. I hope that you found that this video was informative, and until next video, drive safely. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please comment, like, share this video, and if you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to my channel and press that bell icon to get notified when new videos are posted. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can provide me a super thanks. And until next time, cheers.